I was serving the second course when Patricia Miller, my daughter-in-law, slammed her fist on the table. She screamed at me in front of everyone. "You either obey me or get out, old woman." The silence that fell over the dining room was suffocating. I could feel its weight pressing down on my shoulders. My son, Michael, stared at his plate, unable to meet my eyes. He didn't have the courage to defend me. My grandchildren stopped eating and lowered their heads in shame. There I stood, Grace Morgan, 68 years old, being humiliated in my own home at the Sunday dinner I had worked so hard to prepare. Patricia continued, her voice dripping with venom. "I'm sick of you acting like you own this place. I'm the one in charge here." My heart pounded in my chest. But something strange happened. Instead of shrinking away like I always did, I felt an icy calm wash over me. For 45 years, I had built this house brick by brick. I had worked as a seamstress to support Michael after my husband Frank died. Every piece of furniture, every curtain, every plate on that table had been earned with my own sweat and tears. Patricia had arrived 3 years ago when she married my son, and little by little, she had taken over. She reorganized my kitchen, changed the decor, and treated me like a maid in my own home. She complained about my cooking, the way I cleaned, the noise I made in the morning. Michael always took her side. "Mom, Patricia is right. You need to adapt," he would say. But that Sunday, when she humiliated me in front of the whole family, I realized I hadn't just lost my house. I had lost my place in the world. I stood up from the table slowly, removed my apron, and placed it carefully on the chair. "Excuse me," I said in a voice I didn't even recognize as my own. I went upstairs to my room, the only place that was still mine, and locked the door. I sat on the bed where Frank and I had dreamed so many dreams, where I had raised Michael all by myself, where I had cried all my tears of widowhood. Through the gap beneath the door, I could hear the conversation continuing downstairs, as if nothing had happened, as if the owner of the house hadn't just been expelled from her own dinner. Patricia was laughing loudly, completely in command. It was in that moment that I opened the drawer of my nightstand and took out a folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside were all the house documents. The will Frank had left, the deed, the paid receipts. Everything was in my name. Everything was rightfully mine. But what they didn't know was that everything was about to change. The story really began 3 years ago when Patricia entered our lives like a hurricane in a wedding dress. Michael met her at work. She was his boss's secretary, and he fell for her like a lovesick teenager. I was happy at first. I thought it was time for my son to find love after being alone for so long. Patricia was pretty and young, 20 years younger than Michael, with a smile that seemed sincere and sweet words that won us all over. While they were dating, she would come over on Sundays. She helped me in the kitchen. She called me Mrs. Morgan with respect. She praised my cooking. She seemed genuinely interested in our family stories. The wedding day was the happiest I'd had in a long time. I saw Michael beaming, elegant in his suit, dancing with Patricia, like he was the luckiest man in the world. She wore the wedding dress we had picked out together. She looked beautiful, and when she hugged me after the ceremony, she whispered, "Thank you for giving me such a wonderful son, Mrs. Morgan. I promised to take care of him and make him happy." I cried with emotion, thinking I was finally getting a daughter, that the house would be full of life again, that maybe soon there would be grandchildren running down the halls. The first few months were like a honeymoon for everyone. Patricia moved into the house with her few belongings. She came from a humble family in a small town in the Midwest, and she seemed grateful for everything. She helped me with the chores. We cooked together. We watched our soap operas in the afternoon while we embroidered. Michael would come home from work and find us chatting and laughing in the kitchen. "I'm so lucky," he'd say. "My 2 favorite women get along so well." Patricia would kiss him, serve him dinner, and spoil him like a king. I thought I had found the perfect daughter-in-law, that God had blessed our family. But things started to change subtly. First, it was small comments, almost unnoticeable. "Mrs. Morgan, don't you think this living room would look more modern with new furniture? Don't you think the kitchen needs remodeling? Michael works so hard. He deserves to come home to a more contemporary house." At first, I thought she just wanted to contribute, to make improvements. After all, it was natural for a young woman to want to put her personal touch on the house where she was going to live. I accepted her suggestions warmly, thinking it was nice that she felt at home. The first real sign of trouble came when Patricia started reorganizing the kitchen without asking me. One morning, I came downstairs to find all my dishes packed in boxes, my spices stored in different places, my family recipes shoved into a corner. "I'm just organizing things better," she told me with a smile that no longer reached her eyes. "This will be more efficient for cooking." When I asked her where she had put my mortar and pestle, the one my mother had given me when I got married, she said she'd put away because it looked too old and ugly in the new kitchen she was creating. Michael supported all her changes. When I tried to talk to him about the modifications Patricia was making without consulting me, he would say, "Mom, just let Patricia fix the house how she likes. She's going to be the one spending the most time here when we have kids." His words hurt me deeply, but I swallowed them in silence. I didn't want to be the problematic mother-in-law everyone complains about. I wanted my son to be happy. I wanted his marriage to work. So I started to keep quiet, to accept, to give up spaces that had been mine for decades. Patricia's transformation from a loving daughter-in-law to a controlling woman was gradual but relentless. She began to speak to me differently when Michael wasn't around. Her voice became colder, more demanding. "Mrs. Morgan, I didn't like how yesterday's dinner turned out," she'd say. "The beans had too much salt and the rice was dry. You need to pay more attention when you cook." I, who had been cooking for 50 years, who had fed Frank and Michael with love and dedication, was suddenly receiving constant criticism for something I had always done well. When the first grandchildren arrived, 2 beautiful little ones who became the light of my life, I thought things would get better. Patricia would need my help with the babies. She would value my experience as a mother. Maybe she would treat me kindly again. But it was the exact opposite. Patricia became even more territorial, more jealous of my relationship with the children. "Don't give them sweets without asking me," she would order. "Don't hold them so much. You'll spoil them. When you read them stories, do it quietly. I don't want them getting used to the way you talk." Every interaction with my own grandchildren had to be supervised, approved, and controlled by her. The final straw was when Patricia decided that my room, the master bedroom where Frank and I had slept for 20 years of marriage, should be theirs. "It's only logical," she told. "Michael, we are the young couple. We need the bigger room for us and the kids." I protested meekly. I explained that the room had special meaning to me, that all my memories with his father were in there. Michael looked at me impatiently and said, "Mom, stop being so attached to material things. A room is just a room." That night, I moved into the small back room, carrying my few belongings like a refugee in my own home. Patricia began treating me like her personal employee. She woke me up early to make her breakfast exactly how she liked it. Scrambled eggs, not too dry. Coffee with little sugar. Toast that was golden but not burnt. If anything wasn't perfect, she scolded me like a child. "You can't even do something this simple correctly, Grace." I had to wash her clothes a special way, iron Michael's shirts a certain way, clean the house following her new rules. The woman who had worked her whole life to build that house now had to ask permission to use her own kitchen. On Sundays, when the rest of the family came over, my sisters, my brothers-in-law, my nephews, Patricia played the role of the perfect daughter-in-law. She smiled, served coffee, spoke sweetly about how much she loved and respected me. "Grace is such a blessing in our lives," she'd say with a fake smile. I don't know what we'd do without her. But as soon as the guests left, she would go back to being the cold, authoritarian woman I knew. Once, my sister Dolores asked me in private if everything was okay, because she noticed I'd been very quiet lately. I didn't have the courage to tell her the truth. How could I explain that I had become a stranger in my own home? Michael changed completely after getting married. The loving son who used to hug me every morning before work, who told me his problems, who asked for my advice, he disappeared. Patricia became his only confidant, his only priority. When I tried to talk to him about something, he'd answer distractedly, in a hurry to end the conversation and get back to his wife. I can't right now, Mom. Patricia needs me. That was his constant answer. The nights we used to spend talking in the living room, watching TV together, were over. Now they locked themselves in their room, and I was left alone in the living room, feeling the house grow colder and emptier every day. The humiliation on that Sunday was not an isolated event. It was a culmination of 3 years of systematic degradation. Patricia had established her dominance over the house, over Michael, over the grandchildren. The only thing left was to establish it over me definitively. For weeks, she'd been pushing for the Sunday dinner be done her way, with her menu, her rules, her total control. That Sunday, she came prepared for the final confrontation. She had invited her parents and her siblings so they could witness her victory over the old mother-in-law who still dared to act like the owner of the house. When she yelled at me in front of everyone, when she ordered me to obey her or leave, Patricia wasn't just humiliating me. She was symbolically kicking me out of my place in the family. It was her way of saying that the era of Grace Morgan was over, that now she was a matriarch, the one in charge, the one who decided who belonged in the family and who didn't. Michael, by staying silent, by not defending me, confirmed his choice. He had chosen his wife over the mother who had raised him alone, who had sacrificed her youth and her dreams to give him a better life. That night, locked in my small room, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman I saw. Where was the Grace who had worked 2 shifts to pay for Michael's education? Where was the woman who had faced her husband's debt alone and raised her son with dignity? When had I become this scared, submissive woman who accepted humiliation in silence? That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was no longer going to be the victim of my own kindness. I would no longer allow myself to be treated like trash in the house that I built. Patricia wanted a war, and she was going to get one. The next day, my silent transformation would begin. But that night, for the first time in 3 years, I slept in peace. Because when you hit rock bottom, there's only one way to go: up. On Monday, Patricia woke me at 6 a.m, banging on the door. "Grace, the coffee is late. Michael needs to leave early." I went down to the kitchen like a zombie. I made the coffee, set the table, washed the dishes from the dinner that nobody else had bothered to clean. Patricia stood watching me, criticizing every move. "That's not how you cut the bread. That cup is poorly washed. You're too slow." Michael drank his coffee in silence, avoiding my gaze. When he left for work, Patricia turned to me with a cruel smile. "Now that I've established the rules, I expect everything to run perfectly. This house needs a real owner." I kept washing the dishes, but my hands were shaking with suppressed rage. How had I reached this point? How had I become a stranger in my own home? I remember when Michael was little and he'd hug me saying, "Mommy, when I grow up, I'm going to take care of you forever." I remember the nights he was sick, and I spent entire nights by his bed. I remembered working 2 shifts at the sewing factory to pay for his schooling. How I sold my jewelry to buy his university textbooks. How I saved every penny so he could have a better life than me. When Frank died, I promised him I would take care of our son. And I did. I gave up my dreams, my plans, my future. I never dated again. I never traveled. I never thought about myself again. Everything was for Michael. And now, he was married to a woman who treated me like garbage. And he allowed it. In the afternoon, while I was hanging laundry in the yard, I heard Patricia talking on the phone with a friend. I finally convinced my husband to put his mother in her place. The old woman thought she owned the house, but now she knows who's boss here. Soon, I'm going to convince Michael to put her in a nursing home. Then I'll finally have my house in peace. My legs buckled. A nursing home. After everything I did, after all the sacrifices, she wanted to lock me away. And the worst part, she was convincing my own son to do it. I let the clothes fall to the ground and went inside. I went up to my room and locked myself in. I picked up a photo of Michael as a child, back when he looked at me like I was the most important person in the world. That little boy was dead. In his place grew a weak, manipulated man who chose a woman over the mother who gave her life for him. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake remembering every moment of my life with Michael, every sacrifice I had made, every dream I had abandoned for him. I remembered when he was a baby and got pneumonia, how I spent 3 nights without sleep watching over him in the hospital, praying to God not to take him from me. I remembered his first steps in this very house. His first words, Mama, was the first. His first day of school when he cried because he didn't want to leave me. I remember the afternoons doing homework together at the kitchen table, the nights reading him stories before bed, the Sundays going to church together, and then getting ice cream in the park. I remembered when he turned 15, and I threw him a surprise party with all his school friends. I worked weeks of overtime to save the money. I decorated the house with balloons and streamers. I made his favorite chocolate cake. Michael was so happy that night. He hugged me in front of all his friends and said, "My mom is the best in the world." His friends applauded, and I felt like the proudest woman in the state. That boy who looked at me with admiration, who trusted me completely, who needed me. Where had he gone? I remembered his high school graduation, when he went on stage to receive his diploma and looked for me in the crowd to smile. I was in the front row wearing my prettiest dress, the blue one Frank had given me before he died, crying with pride. Michael had been the valedictorian of his class. He had won a scholarship to the university. He had a bright future ahead of him. After the ceremony, he hugged me and said, "Thanks, Mom. Everything I am, I owe to you." That night, we ate at the fanciest restaurant in town. Just him and me, celebrating his achievement and planning his future. We talked about his dreams of being an engineer, of building beautiful buildings, of having his own family someday. College was hard for both of us. Michael studied civil engineering in Chicago. He had to travel 3 hours each day or stay at my sister's house during the week. I worked day and night to pay his expenses, the tuition, the books, the transportation, the food. I sold everything I had of value. The gold earrings Frank gave me when Michael was born, my wedding ring, even my parents' antique wardrobe. But it was worth it. Every semester Michael passed, every class he completed, every step toward his degree was a shared victory. The weekends he came home, he told me everything, his professors, his classmates, the projects he was working on. We were a team, him and me, against the world. When he graduated as an engineer, it was the happiest day of my life since his birth. I traveled to Chicago for the ceremony. I wore my prettiest shawl, the silk one I inherited from my grandmother. Michael looked so handsome in his cap and gown, so mature, so professional. When they called his name to the stage to receive his degree, I screamed with excitement like a crazy person. People looked at me funny, but I didn't care. That was my son, my pride, my whole life, receiving the recognition he deserved for so much effort. After the ceremony, we went to eat, and Michael gave me a silver bracelet with a small engraved plate that said, "For the best mom in the world, thanks for believing in me." The first few years after his graduation were beautiful. Michael got a job at an important construction firm. He earned good money. He helped with the house expenses. On Sundays, we went to market together, bought ingredients to make his favorite dishes. We cooked together while he told me about his work projects. In the afternoons, we sat on the patio drinking coffee and watching the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. Michael bought me little gifts, perfume, a pretty blouse, flowers on the mantel. He told me that when he got married, his wife would have to understand that his mom would always be the most important thing in his life. When he met Patricia, at first I thought she was perfect for him. She was pretty, polite, seemed to love him very much. The first few months they dated, Patricia came to the house often. She helped me in the kitchen. She was interested in the family stories. She treated Michael with so much affection that it made me happy to see them together. One time she told me, "Mrs. Morgan, I want to ask your permission to love your son. I promise I will never try to separate you. You will always be the most important thing to him." I was so moved that I hugged her, crying. Finally, Michael had found a woman who understood how special our relationship was. But now, 3 years later, that sweet woman had turned out to be a mask. The real Patricia was calculating, manipulative, and jealous of anyone who had influence over Michael. She had studied our routines, our habits, our traditions, not to respect them, but to systematically destroy them. Every change she had made in the house was a way of erasing my presence, of eliminating the memories Michael and I had built together. My mother's mortar and pestle hidden, because it looked ugly. The family photos replaced with modern decorations. My grandmother's chili recipe stored in a box because nobody eats that greasy stuff anymore. On Tuesday morning, Patricia woke me up even earlier. Grace, my parents are coming for lunch today. I want you to make red chili, white rice, pinto beans, and fresh tortillas. And I want the house to be spotless. I asked if Michael knew about the visit, and she answered curtly, Michael doesn't need to know everything that happens in his house. I can make decisions without consulting him. I spent the entire morning cooking and cleaning, as if I were the housemaid. When Patricia's parents arrived, humble people, but with an air of arrogance since their daughter had married well, they treated me exactly as she had taught them, with condescension disguised as courtesy. You sure can cook, ma'am, Patricia's mother said while devouring my chili. Patricia is so lucky to have someone to help her with the house chores. Patricia's father, a short mustachioed man who worked as a plumber, walked around my house as if he owned it, criticizing the furniture, suggesting improvements, talking about how outdated everything looked. Look, Patricia, he said to his daughter, you should convince Michael to modernize this living room. With the good salary he earns, you guys can afford those luxuries. I served the food, cleared the plates, washed the dishes while they planned changes to my home as if I were invisible. After lunch, I heard Patricia talking to her mom in the living room. I've almost convinced Michael to look for a nursing home for his mother. The poor thing is very old. She needs special care that we can't give her here. Besides, with the kids growing, we need more space. Her mother replied, Oh, honey, you're so considerate. Old people sometimes don't understand that they're in the way. It's better for everyone if she's in a place where they can care for her professionally. My hands trembled as I dried the dishes. Not only did Patricia want to get rid of me, but she already had her family support to do it. And the most painful part was that they spoke about me as if I were an annoying object that needed to be disposed of. That afternoon, when Michael got home from work, Patricia had already told him her version of the family visit. Honey, my parents came for lunch, and they love the house. My mom says you have great taste in decorating. Michael looked happy to have made a good impression on his in-laws. Patricia continued, By the way, my mom gave me the name of a very good assisted living facility for seniors. She says your mom would be better off there with people her age, with special activities for the elderly. Michael nodded distractedly while changing his clothes. Yeah, honey, we could look into it. My mom is getting older. Maybe she needs more care than we can give her here. I listened to them from my room, where I had taken refuge after cleaning the whole house. My own son was talking about me as if I were a burden, as if I were a problem to be solved. He hadn't asked my opinion. He hadn't considered my feelings. He hadn't thought for 1 second about everything I had sacrificed for him. To Michael, I was already just an annoying old woman taking up space in his house. The house that I had paid for. The house where I had raised him. The house where I had buried my dreams to build his. That night, I didn't come down for dinner. Patricia came up to get me. Grace, dinner's ready. I told her I wasn't hungry. Are you sick? Do you need me to call the doctor? Her fake concern disgusted me. I'm fine, just tired. Patricia stood in the doorway for a few seconds, as if studying me. Well, if you need anything, she said, but in her eyes I saw something different. Satisfaction. She was happy to see me weak, broken, defeated. Every tear of mine was a victory for her. Wednesday dawned gray and rainy, just like my mood. I stayed in bed late, listening to Patricia complaining downstairs that breakfast wasn't ready. Michael, your mom is acting very strange. She didn't eat dinner yesterday. Today, she didn't want to get up. Don't you think we should take her to the doctor? Michael came up to see me. He knocked on my door gently. Mom, are you okay? Patricia says you haven't eaten. I pretended to be asleep. I didn't want to talk to the stranger my son had become. He stood there for a few minutes, then went downstairs. I heard them talking in the kitchen. She's sleeping. Maybe she just needs rest, Michael said. Patricia replied. Or maybe she's starting with dementia. My grandmother started just like that, losing the desire to do normal things. Dementia. Now, they didn't just want to get rid of me for being annoying. They were inventing diseases to justify it. Patricia was smarter than I thought. She wasn't just taking my place in the family. She was building a narrative where she was a long-suffering hero caring for a sick mother-in-law. And Michael was a grieving son who had no choice but to put his mother in a home for her own good. It was a perfect strategy. They would look like the good guys while sending me away to die alone in a facility. In the afternoon, when they were at work and school, I went down to the kitchen. The house was silent. The only sound was the ticking of the clock that Frank had given me on our 5th anniversary. I poured myself a coffee and sat at the table where I had eaten breakfast with Michael so many times when he was a child. I remember the mornings packing his lunch for school, arranging his favorite bean and cheese sandwich, his juice box, a small apple. I remembered how he always said goodbye with a kiss and, "I love you, Mommy," before running off to the school bus. At this table, we had celebrated his birthdays, his good grades, his small victories. At this table, we had cried together when Frank died, holding each other, promising we would always have each other. At this table, we had planned his future, his studies, his dreams. Now this same table was the witness to my daily humiliation, the place where Patricia gave me orders like a servant, where Michael ate in silence, avoiding my eyes. I got up and walked through the house that had been my world for 45 years. In the living room was the armchair where Frank used to sit and read the newspaper in the afternoons, where Michael did his homework while I cooked, where we had watched thousands of soap operas and TV shows together. In the dining room was a table where we had hosted family and friends, where we had celebrated Christmases and birthdays, where last Sunday Patricia had humiliated me in front of everyone. In my old bedroom, now Patricia's, was a bed where Frank and I had loved, where Michael had been born, where I had spent the best nights of my life. Every corner of this house held my soul, my history, my life. Every wall had witnessed my joys and my sorrows, my dreams and my nightmares. How could Michael even consider taking me out of here? How could Patricia pretend that I was the intruder when she had only arrived 3 years ago? But I understood something painful. To them, I was already part of the past, an obstacle to the future they wanted to build together. My history, my sacrifice, my love, none of it mattered anymore. That night, when Michael got home from work, I noticed he avoided me more than ever. He didn't come up to say hello like he used to. He didn't ask about my day. He showed no interest in how I was feeling. Patricia had successfully convinced him that I was a problem, a burden, an annoying responsibility that needed to be dealt with. My own son, the person I had lived for 50 years, now saw me just as Patricia wanted him to see me, as a burdensome old woman who refused to understand that her time was over. But they didn't know that the woman they thought was defeated was just beginning to wake up. On Thursday morning, I didn't go down to make coffee. I stayed in my room, listening to Patricia yelling from downstairs. "Grace, Grace, where's that woman?" I heard Michael trying to calm her down. "Leave her, honey. She must still be upset about the other day." Patricia snapped back, upset about nothing. "She's throwing a tantrum. I'm going to go up there." But she didn't come up. Something about my absence made her hesitate. I remained in silence, organizing documents, doing calculations, planning. For the first time in 3 years, the house operated without me. Michael left for work without breakfast. Patricia had to fend for herself, and I discovered something interesting. They needed me far more than I needed them. The house was mine. The name on the deed was mine, and I had rights they couldn't even imagine. When Michael returned from work, he came up to see me. He knocked on the door and said, "Mom, we need to talk." I didn't answer. He insisted, "Please, Mom, open the door." I continued in silence. On Friday, I left the house early for the first time in years. I went to the county recorder's office, the bank, and the office of Mr. Salvador Mendoza, an old family lawyer. Mr. Mendoza listened to me tell him everything, from a humiliation on Sunday to Patricia's plans to put me in a nursing home. He shook his head, outraged. "Mrs. Morgan, You have every right to that house. Your son and daughter-in-law are living there out of your kindness, not because they're entitled to anything. I explained that I wanted to make a radical decision, but I needed to be sure I was acting within the law. Mr. Mendoza smiled. Of course you can. It's your house, your life, your decision. I left his office with important papers in my purse and a feeling of power I hadn't felt in decades. I stopped by the bank, arranged some transfers, made important calls. No one at home knew where I was. Patricia called several times, worried. I didn't answer. When I got home late in the afternoon, Michael and Patricia were waiting for me in the living room, clearly nervous. "Mom, where were you?" "We were worried," Michael said. Patricia added, trying to sound caring. "Yes, Mother. It's not safe for someone your age to be wandering around alone." I looked at them both and smiled. A calm, serene smile that made them even more nervous. I was taking care of some business. I replied, "Important business." I went up to my room, and they stayed downstairs whispering. That night, I heard Patricia pressuring Michael. "She's planning something. You need to do something." But I had already done my part. On Saturday morning, I went down to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. I made coffee, set the table, acted normally. Patricia was suspicious, but she relaxed a little. Michael left for work relieved, thinking I'd gone back to normal. One mistake. During those days of silence, I had remembered something Frank told me shortly before he died. "Grace, in this life, people are going to try and take advantage of your good heart. Don't let them make you a victim of your own kindness. You are stronger than you think. You just need to remember it." I didn't fully understand his words then, but now, 40 years later, they finally made sense. I had spent my entire life being a woman who sacrifices, who adapts, who yields, who forgives. But not anymore. Patricia had awakened a woman she didn't know, a woman capable of making hard decisions to protect her dignity. The process of my transformation had begun on Monday, when I decided not to get up early to serve them. For the first time in 3 years, Patricia had to make her own coffee, prepare Michael's breakfast, and set the table. I heard her cursing in the kitchen, burning the eggs, spilling the coffee. Michael left late for work because no one had packed his lunch. That small act of rebellion had caused chaos in their perfectly organized routines. I realized that my submission was what kept their comfortable world running. Without me, they were two spoiled adults who didn't know how to take care of themselves. On Tuesday, when Patricia yelled my name demanding I come down, I stayed in my room reading the Bible Frank had given me. I found a verse that spoke directly to my heart. "It is better to live in a corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife." Although it spoke of difficult women, I thought it also applied to my situation. Better to live alone with dignity than in a big house being humiliated. Wednesday was when I decided to act. While they were at work, I went down to the study, where Frank kept his important documents. I hadn't been in there for years. Patricia had turned it into a playroom for the children. But in the back closet, behind toys and children's books, I found the safe that Frank had installed years ago. Inside were all the house deeds, the will, the insurance policies, the payment receipts. Everything was in my name. Frank had been very careful to protect me legally. He knew that one day I might be alone and vulnerable. As I reviewed the documents, I found something I had completely forgotten. A second property, a small apartment downtown that Frank had bought as an investment shortly before he died. All these years it had been rented out, and the money was automatically deposited into a bank account I never checked. With the accumulated rent and interest, there was a considerable amount of money that Patricia and Michael knew nothing about. Frank had left me more protected than I ever imagined. That afternoon, I called Mr. Mendoza to consult him about my rights and options. "Mrs. Morgan," he told me, "you are the sole owner of that house. Your son has no legal right to the property. You can do whatever you want with it, sell it, rent it, or simply evict the current occupants." I asked him about the legal process to get my house back. "It's very simple," he explained. "Since it's your property and they don't pay rent or have a contract, you can give them a notice to vacate. If they refuse, we can start an eviction process." His words gave me the strength I needed to make the final decision. On Thursday morning, When I didn't come down to make coffee, Patricia came up to my door, furious. "Grace, enough with these tantrums. Come down immediately and do your job." Your job. That's how she saw me, as her personal employee. I yelled from inside, "I don't work for you anymore, Mrs. Miller." She was silent for a few seconds, surprised by my response. Then she started pounding on the door. "Open this door immediately. I am the one in charge of this house." But I didn't open it. For the first time in 3 years, I had said no to Patricia Miller, and it felt liberating. When Michael returned from work that Thursday, Patricia had already told him her version of events. "Your mother's going crazy, Michael. She yelled at me. She disrespected me. She refuses to do her duties in the house."